In the dimly lit chambers of Renaissance Florence, where power shifted like shadows in candlelight, Niccolo Machiavelli understood a truth that echoes through the corridors of modern finance. Wealth is not accumulated through kindness or wishful thinking, but through calculated strategy, unwavering discipline, and the ruthless elimination of one's weaker impulses. Today, as we navigate the treacherous waters of 26's economic landscape, his principles remain as sharp and relevant as a Florentine blade. The financial markets of our time bear striking resemblance to the political battlefields that Machiavelli observed 5 centuries ago. Fortunes rise and fall not by accident but by design. Those who master themselves first, who destroy their weak tendencies toward comfort, procrastination, and emotional decision-making, position themselves to conquer the external world of wealth creation. The man who cannot govern his impulses will never govern his finances, and he who cannot destroy his weakest self will inevitably be destroyed by those who have. Rule 1. Never reveal your true financial position. Machiavelli understood that information asymmetry was the cornerstone of strategic advantage. In The Prince, he wrote that a ruler must be both fox and lion, cunning in deception and fierce in execution. This principle translates directly to wealth building in 2026, where your financial position is your most valuable state secret. The weak man broadcasts his every investment win on social media, displays his luxury purchases for validation, and discusses his financial strategies at dinner parties. He believes that sharing success will somehow multiply it, that transparency breeds trust and opportunity. This man has destroyed himself before any external force can touch him. He has revealed his hand to competitors, telegraphed his move to those who would exploit his knowledge, and painted a target on his resources for parasites and predators. The strong man, conversely, moves like a submarine beneath the financial surface. His investments are private, his income streams hidden, his true net worth known only to himself and perhaps his most trusted advisors. When colleagues discuss their stock picks, he listens but rarely contributes. When friends boast of their cryptocurrency gains, he smiles and changes the subject. When family members ask about his financial situation, he deflects with humor or vague pleasantries. This strategy serves multiple purposes in the modern economy. First, it protects you from those who would seek to benefit from your success without contributing to it. The moment people know you have money, they begin to see you as a source of funding for their ventures, emergencies, and lifestyle choices. Second, it prevents envy-driven sabotage, a force more destructive in 2006 than ever before, where a single social media post can destroy reputations and opportunities. Third, it maintains your strategic flexibility, allowing you to act without others anticipating your moves or positioning themselves to counter your strategies. Consider the billionaire who drives a modest car to his office in a nondescript building, while his competitors flaunt their wealth through conspicuous consumption. He accumulates while they display, he compounds while they consume, he builds empires while they build images. The weak seek validation through wealth display, the strong seek multiplication through wealth concealment. Rule 2. Exploit every opportunity, even at the expense of relationships. Machiavelli famously declared that it is better to be feared than loved, for fear lasts longer than affection. In the realm of wealth building, this translates to a harsh truth. Financial success often requires choosing profit over popularity, strategy over sentiment, and long-term wealth over short-term social comfort. The weak man allows relationships to constrain his financial decisions. He avoids investing in a competitor's company because it might upset his friend who works there. He refuses to purchase distressed assets because the previous owner is someone he knows personally. He passes on lucrative opportunities because they might create awkward dinner conversations or strain family gatherings. This man has allowed his emotional attachments to become financial chains, binding him to mediocrity while others ascend to prosperity. The strong man recognizes that business is warfare by other means, and in warfare, sentiment is a luxury that leads to defeat. He invests where the returns are highest, regardless of personal connections. He negotiates every deal to his maximum advantage, understanding that kindness in business is often cruelty in disguise. It creates inefficient markets and poor outcomes for all parties. He purchases assets from distressed sellers not out of malice, but out of recognition that capital flows to its most productive use, and his use is more productive than theirs. This does not mean abandoning all human decency or becoming a sociopathic predator. Rather, it means creating clear boundaries between personal relationships and financial opportunities, and being willing to prioritize long-term wealth creation over short-term social comfort. The man who cannot separate emotion from economics will find himself poor among rich friends, while the man who masters this separation will find himself wealthy enough to be generous to those who truly matter. In 2026's gig economy and disrupted markets, opportunities arise and vanish with unprecedented speed. The person who hesitates to exploit an advantage because it might upset someone else will watch that advantage flow to someone with fewer scruples and more focus. Real estate deals, stock options, business partnerships, and investment opportunities wait for no one's feelings. They reward swift, decisive action from those who understand that wealth creation is not a popularity contest. Rule 3. Create multiple income streams that cannot be controlled by others. Machiavelli observed that dependency breeds vulnerability, and vulnerability invites exploitation. In the context of modern wealth building, this wisdom manifests as the critical importance of income diversification, not just having multiple income streams, but having multiple income streams that cannot be simultaneously controlled or eliminated by any single entity or force. The weak man builds his entire financial life around a single employer, a single skill set, or a single market sector. He believes that loyalty and specialization will provide security, that putting all his energy into one basket will yield the highest returns. This man has made himself a vassal to forces beyond his control. When his industry faces disruption, when his company undergoes restructuring, or when his skill becomes obsolete, he faces financial devastation. He has created a single point of failure in his income system. And in the volatile economy of 2026, single points of failure are death sentences. The strong man constructs his income like a fortress with multiple towers, each drawing from different sources and protected by different moats. He might have a primary job in technology while running a consulting business in marketing, investing in rental properties, trading financial markets, and building a digital product business. Each income stream operates independently, draws from different economic forces, and would continue functioning even if the others were compromised. More importantly, these income streams are designed to be anti-fragile. They benefit from disorder and uncertainty rather than suffering from it. His consulting business grows when companies face challenges and need expertise. His real estate investments profit from inflation and economic uncertainty. His digital products scale globally without geographic limitations. His trading activities can profit from both rising and falling markets. This man has not just diversified his income, he has weaponized economic volatility to his advantage. The creation of multiple income streams requires the destruction of several weak tendencies: the desire for simplicity, the comfort of routine, the illusion of security through specialization, and the fear of failure across multiple fronts. The weak man prefers the apparent safety of a single, predictable income source. The strong man embraces the complexity and initial instability of building multiple income engines, understanding that true security comes not from avoiding risk, but from spreading risk across so many areas that no single failure can destroy him. In practical terms, this means developing skills across different domains, building relationships in various industries, and constantly exploring new ways to monetize your knowledge, time, and resources. It means viewing every skill you learn, every relationship you build, and every piece of knowledge you acquire through the lens of potential income generation. The goal is not just to have multiple jobs, but to create a portfolio of income streams that together provide more security and growth potential than any single source ever could. Rule 4. Accumulate assets, not liabilities disguised as status symbols. Machiavelli understood that true power lay not in appearances but in substance, not in the symbols of strength, but in strength itself. This principle becomes crucial when applied to modern wealth building, where the difference between assets and liabilities often determines who builds lasting wealth and who merely builds lasting debt. The weak man confuses consumption with investment, believing that spending money on expensive items somehow contributes to his financial growth. He purchases luxury cars that depreciate rapidly, designer clothes that add nothing to his earning capacity, expensive watches that merely tell the same time as cheaper alternatives, and homes far larger than his needs simply because he can afford the mortgage payments. This man believes he is building wealth when he is actually destroying it, systematically converting his money into objects that drain his resources while providing no return on investment. The paradox of status symbol spending is that it often signals the opposite of what the purchaser intends. The person driving a luxury car financed at high interest rates, living in an oversized house with a crushing mortgage, and wearing expensive clothes purchased on credit cards is not displaying wealth. He is displaying his inability to distinguish between wealth and its superficial trappings. He has become a slave to the very symbols he thought would represent his freedom. The strong man applies Machiavellian cunning to every purchase decision, asking not whether he can afford something, but whether that something will make him wealthier over time. He drives a reliable, efficient vehicle that serves its purpose without consuming excessive resources. He lives in a home that meets his needs without overwhelming his budget. He dresses appropriately for his circumstances without falling victim to fashion marketing. Most importantly, he directs the money others spend on status symbols toward acquiring assets that generate income, appreciate in value, or provide strategic advantages. This approach requires destroying several weak psychological tendencies: the need for external validation, the desire to keep up with peers, the confusion between net worth and lifestyle, and the immediate gratification impulse that prioritizes present pleasure over future wealth. The weak man buys to feel better about himself. The strong man buys to make himself better positioned for the future. In 2026's economy, where social media amplifies status competition and consumer culture has reached unprecedented levels of sophistication, this principle becomes even more critical. The algorithms that govern our digital lives are designed to make us dissatisfied with what we have and eager to purchase what we don't need. Breaking free from this psychological manipulation requires understanding that true wealth is measured not by what you own, but by what owns you. The man who owns assets controls his destiny. The man owned by liabilities has surrendered that control to his creditors. Practical application means redirecting status spending toward income-producing assets. Instead of a luxury car, invest in dividend-paying stocks. Instead of expensive watches, purchase rental properties. Instead of designer clothes, build a business. The goal is to reach a point where your assets generate enough passive income that you can afford any status symbol you desire, but by then you'll likely discover that you no longer desire them. Part 2. The strategic execution of wealth dominance. The transition from understanding Machiavellian principles to implementing them represents the difference between academic knowledge and practical power. In the second phase of wealth building, we move beyond foundational rules to the sophisticated strategies that separate temporary success from lasting financial dominance. Here, the weak tendencies become more subtle and the required ruthlessness more nuanced, but the stakes grow exponentially higher. Rule 5. Use debt as a weapon, not a crutch. Machiavelli recognized that the same tool could be either a weapon or a weakness depending on how it was wielded. Modern debt exemplifies this principle perfectly. It can accelerate wealth building for those who understand its power, or it can destroy those who fall victim to its dangers. The distinction lies not in avoiding debt, but in mastering the art of strategic leverage, while destroying the weak impulses that lead to destructive borrowing. The weak man uses debt as a crutch to support a lifestyle he cannot afford. He borrows to purchase cars, vacations, consumer goods, and experiences that provide temporary pleasure but no lasting value. He views credit cards as extensions of his income rather than financial tools requiring careful management. He justifies high-interest borrowing through emotional reasoning. He deserves the luxury item. He needs the experience, or he can't wait to save the money first. This man has become a slave to lenders, working not to build his own wealth but to pay interest to others who understood debt's true purpose. The strong man approaches debt like a master swordsman approaches his blade, with respect, precision, and clear strategic intent. He borrows money only to acquire assets that will generate more income than the cost of the debt, or to execute opportunities that would otherwise be impossible. He uses other people's money to multiply his own, understanding that properly leveraged debt is not an expense but an investment multiplier. Real estate investments funded through mortgages, business expansions financed through strategic loans, or education that dramatically increases earning capacity represent debt used as a wealth-building weapon. The critical distinction lies in cash flow analysis and risk management. The weak man borrows based on his ability to make minimum payments. The strong man borrows based on the asset's ability to service the debt while providing additional returns. A rental property that generates enough income to pay its mortgage plus provide monthly cash flow is debt used strategically. A vacation financed through credit cards is debt used destructively. In 2026's complex financial landscape, sophisticated debt instruments provide unprecedented opportunities for those who understand them, and devastating consequences for those who don't. Zero-interest promotional periods, investment property loans, business lines of credit, and margin lending can all accelerate wealth building when used by someone who has destroyed their weak impulses toward consumption and instant gratification. The same tools will destroy someone who hasn't developed the discipline to distinguish between productive and destructive debt. The psychological transformation required involves destroying the weak man's relationship with money as a tool for immediate pleasure and replacing it with a strong man's view of money as a tool for future dominance. This means being willing to drive an older car in order to qualify for an investment property loan, living below your means to maintain the cash reserves necessary for strategic opportunities, and viewing interest payments not as burdens but as the cost of accessing other people's capital for your benefit. Rule 6. Master the art of tax optimization without crossing legal lines. Machiavelli understood that the most successful princes were those who could operate within the system while maximizing their advantages, neither breaking laws that would bring destruction, nor failing to exploit every legal opportunity for advancement. Modern tax strategy embodies this principle, requiring sophisticated knowledge of legal optimization techniques while maintaining absolute compliance with regulatory requirements. The weak man approaches taxes with resignation or ignorance, viewing them as an unchangeable burden that must be endured. He files basic returns, claims standard deductions, and pays whatever amount the government calculates without question or optimization. This man has surrendered a significant portion of his wealth-building capacity to the state, not out of patriotic duty, but out of laziness and lack of financial education. He pays more than legally required because he hasn't invested the time and energy necessary to understand the complex but entirely legal strategies available to minimize his tax burden. The strong man recognizes that tax optimization is not tax evasion. It is the intelligent application of legal strategies to retain as much wealth as possible for investment and growth. He understands that every dollar paid in unnecessary taxes is a dollar that cannot compound for his benefit over decades. He studies tax law, engages qualified professionals, and structures his investments, business activities, and financial decisions to minimize his legal tax obligations while maintaining full compliance with all regulations. This approach requires understanding the difference between tax avoidance, legal, and tax evasion, illegal, and why crossing that line destroys everything you've worked to build. The strong man never risks his entire wealth-building enterprise for marginal tax savings, but he also never leaves significant legal opportunities on the table out of ignorance or misplaced moral sentiment about paying his fair share. Practical tax optimization in 2026 includes maximizing retirement account contributions, utilizing tax-advantage investment structures, implementing proper business entity selection, taking advantage of depreciation benefits on real estate investments, and timing income and deductions strategically across tax years. For business owners, it includes understanding the difference between profits and taxable income, implementing legitimate business expense strategies, and structuring operations to take advantage of available tax credits and deductions. The psychological shift required involves destroying the weak man's passive relationship with his financial obligations and replacing it with an active strategic approach to wealth retention. This means viewing tax planning as an essential skill rather than an optional consideration, investing in professional guidance when beneficial, and dedicating time to understanding how different financial decisions impact tax obligations. Most importantly, it means recognizing that legal tax optimization is not selfish or unpatriotic. It is intelligent resource allocation that allows you to build more wealth, create more value, and ultimately contribute more to society through your increased economic capacity. The man who pays unnecessary taxes has less money available for investment, job creation, and charitable giving. The man who optimizes his taxes legally has more resources available for productive use. Rule 7. Negotiate every deal as if your survival depends on it. Machiavelli observed that successful princes never entered negotiations from positions of weakness, and when they did find themselves disadvantaged, they quickly maneuvered to create leverage or withdrew from the engagement entirely. In modern wealth building, negotiation skills determine whether you capture fair value in your transactions or systematically overpay for everything from real estate to business services, gradually bleeding wealth through suboptimal agreements. The weak man approaches negotiations with several destroying tendencies: the desire to be liked, the fear of conflict, the assumption that initial offers are fair, and the belief that aggressive negotiation is somehow morally wrong. This man pays asking prices without question, accepts initial terms without counteroffers, and prioritizes pleasant interactions over optimal outcomes. He believes that being reasonable in negotiations will somehow be reciprocated, failing to understand that the other party is likely optimizing for their benefit, not his. Over a lifetime, this weakness costs hundreds of thousands of dollars in overpaid purchases and suboptimal agreements. The strong man understands that every negotiation is a transfer of wealth from one party to another, and that failing to advocate for his interests ensures that wealth flows away from him rather than toward him. He prepares thoroughly for every significant negotiation, researching market prices, understanding the other party's motivations, and identifying multiple alternatives to the current deal. He negotiates not from emotion but from strategy, focusing on outcomes rather than relationships. This doesn't mean being aggressive, dishonest, or unreasonable. Instead, it means being prepared, persistent, and strategic. The strong negotiator presents factual arguments for better terms, demonstrates knowledge of market conditions, and maintains the willingness to walk away if the deal doesn't meet his requirements. He understands that the person who needs the deal least has the most leverage, so he never enters important negotiations without alternatives. In 2026's economy, negotiation opportunities exist everywhere. Salary discussions, real estate transactions, business contracts, service agreements, investment terms, and even routine purchases of significant items. The compound effect of consistent negotiation success creates substantial wealth advantages over time. Negotiating a 10% better price on a home purchase saves tens of thousands of dollars that can be invested for compound growth. Negotiating better salary terms increases lifetime earning capacity by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Negotiating favorable business contract terms can mean the difference between profitable and unprofitable ventures. The psychological transformation required involves destroying the weak man's need for approval and replacing it with the strong man's focus on results. This means being comfortable with temporary tension in service of long-term benefit, understanding that professional negotiation is not personal conflict, and recognizing that skilled negotiators respect other skilled negotiators more than they respect pushovers. Practical negotiation mastery includes understanding anchoring effects. The first number mentioned influences all subsequent discussions. Developing BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement, before entering discussions, learning to use silence as a negotiation tool, and recognizing the difference between positions, what people say they want, and interests, why they want it. Advanced practitioners learn to negotiate multivariable agreements where both parties can win through creative structuring rather than simple zero-sum price negotiations. Rule 8. Build strategic alliances while maintaining independence. Machiavelli counseled that alliances should be formed based on mutual benefit rather than personal affection, and that smart princes maintained multiple alliances while avoiding dependence on any single ally. Modern wealth building requires similar strategic thinking about relationships, partnerships, and professional networks, building connections that provide mutual value while maintaining the independence necessary to act in your best interests. The weak man builds relationships randomly, based on personal chemistry, proximity, or social pressure rather than strategic value. He confuses networking with friendship, believing that being well-liked is more important than being strategically positioned. This man often finds himself surrounded by people who drain his resources, distract from his goals, or provide little value in return for his investment of time and energy. He may be popular at social gatherings, but he lacks the strategic relationships necessary for significant wealth building. Alternatively, the weak man might isolate himself entirely, believing that independence requires avoiding all alliances and partnerships. This man attempts to build wealth purely through individual effort, missing opportunities that require collaboration, connections, or resources beyond his personal capacity. He succeeds only to the extent that single-person efforts can succeed, limiting himself to opportunities that don't require strategic partnerships or network effects. The strong man constructs his network like a strategic asset portfolio, with each relationship serving specific purposes while contributing to an overall strategic advantage. He identifies individuals who possess skills, resources, knowledge, or connections that complement his own capabilities. He builds relationships with potential mentors who can provide guidance, peers who can provide opportunities and collaboration, and potential mentees who can provide energy and fresh perspectives. These strategic alliances serve multiple functions in wealth building. Business partnerships can combine complementary skills and resources to create ventures neither party could achieve alone. Professional networks provide deal flow, referrals, and opportunities that aren't available through public channels. Mentor relationships provide knowledge and wisdom that can prevent costly mistakes and accelerate learning curves. Peer relationships provide accountability, collaboration opportunities, and emotional support during challenging periods. The critical balance involves providing genuine value to these relationships while maintaining the independence necessary to make decisions based on your strategic interests rather than social obligations. This means being generous with your knowledge, connections, and resources when it serves mutual benefit, while being willing to decline opportunities or end relationships when they no longer serve your strategic goals. In 2026's hyperconnected economy, network effects are more powerful than ever. Access to the right opportunities, partnerships, and resources often depends more on who you know than what you know. However, the same connectivity that creates opportunities also creates noise, distraction, and the potential for parasitic relationships that consume resources without providing value. Strategic relationship building requires destroying several weak tendencies: the need to be liked by everyone, the inability to say no to requests that don't serve your interests, the confusion between social relationships and strategic alliances, and the belief that using relationships for mutual benefit is somehow manipulative. The strong man understands that the best strategic relationships are those where both parties benefit significantly, and that creating such relationships requires being strategically valuable to others. Part 3. The Mastery of Financial Warfare. The final phase of Machiavellian wealth building transcends tactics and strategy to embrace the mindset and systematic approaches that create lasting financial dominance. Here, we address the most sophisticated principles that separate those who achieve temporary wealth from those who build generational fortunes. These final rules require the complete destruction of conventional thinking about money, risk, and success. Rule 9. Create systems that generate wealth while you sleep. Machiavelli understood that true power came not from personal action but from creating systems and structures that operated according to your will even in your absence. The ultimate expression of financial mastery is the creation of wealth-generating systems that function independently of your daily involvement, allowing your money to work more efficiently than you ever could through personal effort alone. The weak man trades time for money throughout his entire career, believing that personal effort is the only reliable path to financial success. He works longer hours to earn more income, takes on additional jobs to increase his cash flow, and measures his progress by how hard he works rather than how effectively his resources work for him. This man has trapped himself in a linear relationship with wealth. His income stops when he stops working, his progress halts when he halts, and his wealth building is forever limited by the hours in his day and the energy in his body. Even when this man achieves high income levels, he remains vulnerable because his wealth depends entirely on his continued ability and willingness to work. Illness, injury, burnout, or changes in market demand for his skills can destroy his income overnight. He has built a wealth machine that requires his constant presence and attention, making him a slave to his own financial system rather than its master. The strong man understands that true wealth comes from owning systems that generate money without requiring his direct involvement. He builds businesses that operate profitably under management, acquires rental properties that generate monthly cash flow, creates intellectual property that produces royalties, and constructs investment portfolios that compound through market returns and dividend payments. This man has transformed himself from a worker to an owner, from someone who trades time for money to someone who uses money to generate more money. The creation of passive income systems requires significant upfront investment, not just financial capital, but time, energy, and expertise invested in learning how to build systems that work without you. Real estate requires understanding markets, financing, property management, and tenant relations. Business ownership requires understanding operations, management, marketing, and strategic planning. Investment portfolios require understanding markets, risk management, diversification, and long-term strategic thinking. The psychological transformation required involves destroying the weak man's belief that he must personally create every dollar he earns, and embracing the strong man's understanding that his most valuable creation is systems that create value without his presence. This means being willing to work extremely hard in the short term to build systems that allow him to work less hard in the long term, accepting lower immediate returns in exchange for building assets that will generate returns indefinitely. In 2026's digital economy, passive income opportunities have expanded dramatically. Digital products can be created once and sold infinitely without additional production costs. Online businesses can operate globally with minimal geographic constraints. Investment platforms provide access to previously exclusive opportunities like real estate crowdfunding, peer-to-peer lending, and international markets. Cryptocurrency and DeFi protocols offer new forms of yield generation that didn't exist in previous decades. However, these opportunities also require more sophisticated knowledge and carry new types of risks. The strong man invests the time necessary to understand these systems thoroughly before committing significant resources, while the weak man either avoids them entirely out of fear or jumps into them without proper education, leading to losses that set back his wealth-building efforts. Rule 10. Master the psychology of money to control your financial destiny. Machiavelli's deepest insight was that human psychology, not external circumstances, determine success or failure in the pursuit of power. The ultimate Machiavellian money rule involves mastering the psychological forces that drive financial decisions, recognizing that your mind is either your greatest asset or your greatest liability in wealth building, and that external financial success is impossible without internal psychological mastery. The weak man is controlled by emotional responses to financial stimuli. He panics during market downturns and sells at the worst possible times, becomes euphoric during bubbles and buys at market peaks, makes impulsive purchases based on temporary emotions, and allows fear to prevent him from taking calculated risks that could accelerate his wealth building. This man's financial results are determined not by market conditions or opportunities, but by his psychological reactions to changing circumstances. More insidiously, the weak man often sabotages his own success through unconscious psychological patterns. He may feel guilty about accumulating wealth and unconsciously spend or give it away, feel unworthy of financial success and make decisions that confirm his low self-worth, or fear the responsibilities that come with wealth, and unconsciously avoid opportunities that would increase his net worth. These internal conflicts create invisible barriers to wealth building that no external strategy can overcome. The strong man recognizes that mastering money requires first mastering himself. He understands that successful investing requires emotional discipline more than analytical skill, that building businesses requires psychological resilience more than technical knowledge, and that maintaining wealth requires mental clarity more than complex strategies. He systematically identifies and destroys the psychological patterns that interfere with optimal financial decision-making. This involves developing specific mental skills, the ability to think probabilistically rather than in certainties, understanding the difference between risk and uncertainty, maintaining long-term perspective during short-term volatility, and making decisions based on logic and evidence rather than emotion and impulse. Advanced practitioners learn to use their understanding of psychology to recognize market inefficiencies created by other people's emotional decisions, profiting from panic selling, bubble buying, and other predictable psychological patterns that drive market movements. The financial markets of 2026 are increasingly driven by behavioral psychology as algorithmic trading systems exploit human emotional patterns, and social media amplifies both fear and greed on unprecedented scales. The person who masters his own psychology gains advantages not just from his improved decision-making, but from his ability to act rationally when others are acting emotionally. Practical psychological mastery includes developing meditation practices that improve emotional regulation, studying behavioral economics to understand common decision-making biases, creating systematic approaches to important financial decisions that remove emotional influence, and building support systems that provide objective perspective during emotionally charged situations. The ultimate psychological transformation involves destroying the weak man's reactive relationship with money and replacing it with the strong man's proactive control over his financial psychology. This means viewing money as a tool rather than a source of identity, understanding that financial setbacks are temporary challenges rather than permanent failures, and recognizing that wealth building is a long-term psychological game that rewards consistency and discipline more than brilliance or luck. Consolation: the transformation from weakness to financial dominance. The 10 rules outlined in this document represent more than financial strategies. They constitute a complete transformation from the weak man's reactive, emotional, and dependent relationship with money to the strong man's strategic, disciplined, and dominant approach to wealth creation. This transformation requires the systematic destruction of conventional attitudes about money, risk, relationships, and success. The weak man who began this journey believing that wealth building required only better information or more opportunities must be destroyed completely. In his place must emerge the strong man who understands that wealth building is psychological warfare against your own limiting beliefs, emotional impulses, and social conditioning. This new man views every financial decision through the lens of strategic advantage, every relationship through the filter of mutual benefit, and every opportunity through the assessment of risk-adjusted returns. The path from financial weakness to financial dominance is not merely about accumulating money. It is about developing the character, mindset, and systematic approaches that make wealth accumulation inevitable. The man who masters himself first can never be truly defeated by external circumstances because he has developed the internal resources to adapt, overcome, and profit from whatever challenges arise. In 2026's rapidly changing economy, these Machiavellian principles become even more relevant as traditional paths to wealth are disrupted and new opportunities require both sophisticated thinking and decisive action. The person who can combine timeless strategic wisdom with modern tactical knowledge, who can balance ruthless self-interest with intelligent cooperation, and who can maintain long-term vision while executing short-term tactics, will find wealth building not just possible, but inevitable. The ultimate lesson of Machiavellian wealth building is that financial success is not about what happens to you, but about who you become in the process of pursuing it. The man who destroys his weak self in service of building his strong self has created something more valuable than money. He has created the person capable of creating and recreating wealth under any circumstances. This transformation, once complete, can never be undone by market crashes, economic recessions, or external setbacks, because it has changed not just his bank account but his fundamental relationship with the forces that create wealth. The weak man seeks to become rich. The strong man seeks to become the type of person for whom wealth is simply a natural result of his character, decisions, and systematic approaches to life. Choose your transformation wisely, for in the end, you become what you practice, and what you practice in the realm of money will determine whether you control your financial destiny or remain forever controlled by it.